So what does GM mean for farmers' food security and the environment? Well, what's happened with industrial agriculture is that farmers are increasingly on this treadmill, and I think this is maybe related to why farmers can't make a living anymore and agricultural land prices are sort of through the floor. You can't make money growing food anymore, basically, because you have all these inputs that you have to buy from someone and you sell them to the duopolies. So a lot of farmers are like, oh, I've got to increase production. But you increase production and the price falls. So you're running on a treadmill and you get stuck with this technology. You know, oh, we've got to put the fertilizers on. Oh, we've got to put the, pesticides on. And GM is just another treadmill. And so the people who are making money are the lenders, the seed, chemical, fuel and machinery corporations and the landlords. Farmers are not making, and this is a huge issue because around the world what you're finding is farmers are taking second jobs working off farm to support producing food. This is a ridiculous and appalling situation, and nobody should be in that situation, especially not for something as important as food. Okay, what's the result of GM seed being introduced? What I was talking about before, you can't buy non-GM, or the best genetics are lost, and when you seed needs to be grown out and to be cared for. If you're a huge corporation, they're just letting loads of the seed just die because they can't be bothered to manage it. Farmers can't save and replant. If it's GM, you have to buy new every year. So that means that's had a huge additional cost for farmers. They can't keep a bit and resow it, or keep a bit and sell it to the neighbours. Farmers have been sued. The costs have gone up because there's a monopoly. It's about concentrating the power of who does what with seed into corporations rather than where it should be, farmers, gardeners, people out there growing, because the best conservation of seed is farmers in their own fields selecting things that suits them. GM contaminates. The supply chain, things get mixed along the way. Seeds get contaminated, so farmers buy what they think are non-GM seeds, and then they find percentages of them are contaminated. And for example, Bayer had GM rice trial plots that contaminated rice seeds, and so American farmers had their rice refused in Europe, and Bayer is paying out millions of dollars over this. Also the weeds, what we talked about, they outcross. So what happens is canola is related to charlock and wild radish. So if you grow GM canola, well, when GM canola is grown here, it can outcross with those weeds and then become a reservoir of those GM genes, basically. And also volunteers are, you've had a canola crop and then you sow a wheat crop, and suddenly all these leftover seeds from last year germinate, and suddenly you've got GM canola as a weed. It alters the whole soil biology because you're spraying over chemicals, or you've got the Bt genes, they're pumping out all this Bt, and that changes the whole soil life. They're not designed to have all these plant-produced chemicals coming at them. And it does appear to be that contamination is the aim of the GM industry. The hope of the industry is that over time the market is so flooded with GMOs that there's nothing you can do about it. we just sort of surrender. Okay, that's what's planned for us. What's happening at the moment is Steve Marsh is a WA organic farmer. His neighbour grew GM canola. What happens is canola is cut and laid down to dry before it's harvested. Wind came along, blew it onto Steve's farm. His sheep ate it, which meant that they were no longer considered organic. There was also a flood, so he's got little GM canola plants all over the place, and of course he's organic, he can't spray. So the only way he can do anything is to sue his neighbour. Now, suing a neighbour, he grew up with this man, they went to school together, and to sue your neighbour in a small country area is almost totally taboo. But that's the only way he can really try and bring any sort of responsibility into this. So Steve Marsh is just amazingly brave to do this, because, I mean, he's got his farm on the line, you know, he's got his livelihood and everything, and a lot of nasty things are being said about him, so I really strongly suggest that if you're interested in this, support it. I gave a talk in Canada earlier this year, and there's been a lot of issues around farmers being sued by Monsanto over there, and this was the story that really got them interested. They were so fascinated. So this is not just some little farmer in WA. This case is of global significance, because if we can get some responsibility sheeted back to the owners of the technology, then we can make it better for farmers and everyone. The other thing is that the WA government is saying, oh, the problem isn't that you know, the GM canola blew over there. The problem is that organics don't allow any GM contamination, and so what you should do is allow GM contamination. So I think we saw the slide before. This is all part of the hammering away. No, you don't deserve GM-free crops. You just have to eat the stuff. This is a wider issue as well on environment-wide stuff. I don't know if you heard, but some research was done to find that GM had contaminated Mexican corn land races, which is incredibly important, because that's what is used to bring in you know, disease-resistant, or to keep our crops fresh. You need the land races, the wild plants, and also GM genes, because canola is a brassica. And they don't grow any canola in Japan, but they import a lot for animal feed, and they found a wild growing broccoli that was contaminated with the GM canola, because broccoli's in the brassica family. So I think we really need to wake up, you know, what's happening to our vegetables. I don't want to panic people, but I'm just sort of thinking these are living things. They don't just sit there. We've got to think about it. And so I think our food security is at risk. It sounds like it's all doom and gloom, but actually so much really, which you would all know, so much really fantastic stuff about how you can triple yields by growing acacia, so that's nitrogen fixing, or greening the desert, little film. You know, like, we can feed people, we know how to do it, food swaps, permablitzes. So the thing to do as well is to lobby the politicians on the patent amendment, and if you want to develop a policy on GM, it's really important, because I think a lot of people think, oh, GM, it's too hard. And the other thing is that there are all these great groups up there, like Sydney Food Fairness Alliance, of course, but I'm part of the Australian Food Sovereignty Alliance, and they're getting together to put a submission in for the national food policy as well. And internationally, there's NAVDANIA, and we've linked up with them, and there's a GM report coming out later this year. And then there's Via Campesina, which is, and the World Social, you know. So this isn't just, like, it can be really small, but it has these enormous global links. And finally, I just love this quote from Arundhati Roy, because basically we're setting up all these ridiculously impossible ways that it's going to break open and flower into something much better if we put all our energies into that. Okay, thank you.